Thanks for tuning in to Stay Sharp with Razorleaf, your secret weapon for all things digital in products and manufacturing. In this episode, Jen Ferrello and Jonathan Scott discuss the current state of the product lifecycle management industry, focusing on the impact of cloud technology on PLM options and strategies. They explore the challenges posed by the abundance of choices available to customers due to cloud solutions, the financial implications of different PLM deployment methods, and the varying definitions of cloud across different vendors. This conversation also explores the nuances of cloud offerings, the evolution of PLM, and the expanding scope of PLM in modern industries. Let's tune in.
Welcome back, everybody, to Stay Sharp, the podcast about all things digital related to products and manufacturing. I am Jen Ferrello, and I am joined today by my friend and co-host, Jonathan Scott.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, it's going to be a good day.
It is. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go.
I know it. We are under the gun here. So anyway, we talk a lot, both at this podcast and in work, about PLM. I mean, it makes sense, right?
I love it.
I don't think anybody loves PLM quite as much as you do.
That could be true.
It's one of the things we talk about you behind your back.
Yeah, you should.
But it makes sense. PLM does form the foundation of a lot of the projects that Razorleaf does, and the value that our knowledge, the Razorleaf brings to the table with customers and prospects. So, as much as we talk about PLM, and Razorleaf works with it in and around the different PLM systems, especially you, Jonathan, as a chief solution architecture, another important thing you can bring to the customers is all the things that you're seeing in the PLM industry as well, both from an implementation side, from a technology side, et cetera. So I wanted to spend like a quick 20, 25 minutes just talking about what are you seeing when you look in the PLM industry? Where is it going right now? You're really feet on the ground here. So you've got to have a pretty good view of that.
Well, I hope I do. I've got things that I see. I don't know if they're, who knows how valuable they are. But I think the things I'd like to bring up and talk about are the things that I think I see happening over and over again that look like trends, that look like changes or shifts in the industry that are worth bringing up for people to pay attention to and notice, right? So I think the things that I want to bring up, this isn't meant to be like a comprehensive list by any means, but the things that come to my mind when we brought up the topic and we said, hey, why don't we do an episode on this and talk about like what we see in the industry are the things that I think are relevant for people to notice and pay attention to, and hopefully some insight, or at least the insight that I would share that I think I have that could help them do something with those observations. Like what should that mean to you? What should you be thinking about because of them?
Right. And I think it's a very valuable discussion to have because we're not trying to do what like analysts, like what SIM data or any of those. Yeah. This is not as a whole, the industry is moving in this direction and we're seeing these. No, this is more, if you will, like trends on the ground. This is more what we're seeing at our customers and the technologies, et cetera.
Yeah, so, and what's bubbling up, right? What are people talking about? What is it meaning? What is it changing? What's happening as a result of some of these? Yeah, I agree.
Right. One of the real value that as being vendor agnostic that we can bring, right? It's because we see all of the different technologies. So
that's a great place to start.
Without further ado.
Yeah, that's a perfect place to start, Jen. One of the things that we've done as a business over time is that we work with multiple PLM vendors, multiple PLM systems, PDM systems. So we work with a lot of different tools, see a lot of the different things from different perspectives. And I think the first thing that I would observe today that we see going on in the industry is the number of options because of cloud, right? So I'm going to tie this specifically to cloud.
Okay.
So, the cloud showed up, I'm going to call it 10 years ago, just in terms of my consciousness of what cloud was and does it matter and how does it matter and that kind of thing. I'm sure it was longer ago than that. But that, for me, all right, 10 years ago, cloud shows up.
Okay.
And then it trickles into our industry and we see things happening with PLM vendors and cloud. And so now, fast forward to now, what I'm saying is because of the introduction of cloud, the observation I'll offer is that a lot of customers have too many options and it's making it difficult for them to zero in and find what they need for a PLM system or a PLM tool and to define their PLM strategy because they've just got so many choices now. And so what do I mean by that? So I want to explain.
Right. I'm interested to hear it too, because is it because the cloud enabled a quicker delivery? Is it because it allowed like a wider reach, allowed more sharing of data? Why cloud?
Yes. It's yes. I mean, it's because it's all those things, and I'm using cloud as a label, but
Right.
it is the combination of cloud and software as a service, that type of cloud, right? So Propel, OpenBOM, Duro PLM, Arena, truly, software as a service available on the cloud, but also X as a service. So fill in your favorite X there. Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, right? And I'm not going to get into that because I'm not that guy to explain all of that, but let's take it down to what I think is its simplest form. And that is, I don't want servers in my data center. I want to buy Amazon Web Services or Azure servers or Google Cloud hardware, that kind of thing. That's what I want, right? So I want infrastructure as a service, term of servers on, and I'm still going to buy traditional PLM. Okay, so now I've got new cloud PLM tools, like the couple that I named, software as a service.
Right.
I've got existing, I'll call heritage PLM systems, Windchill, Teamcenter, 3D Experience, Innovia, that kind of stuff, Eris, that I can buy as an on-premise type of solution and deploy it on-premise in my data center, deploy it off of my premises, but in somebody else's data center, could deploy it on somebody's infrastructure as a service like AWS or Azure. Or now these vendors also offer me some type of cloud offering themselves.
Right.
Okay, so suddenly I've got this spectrum of a huge number of choices. And that's what I mean. That's the first observation I want to offer, is that cloud has given people too many choices. And it's made it very difficult for them to compare and contrast, and they get lost in the noise, and then they sort of lose the thread of what they were trying to do in the first place. So that's what I mean by that.
And I can see that. So it's not just, more tools would have been an additive factor, right? More deployment methods would have been a multiplicative factor. But now what you're talking about, you combine the two, you've got exponential.
Right.
Right.
And the vendors, so I'll speak for a minute about some of the heritage vendors. Some of them have taken a couple of different stabs at it over time. So, Gen 1 was this kind of mode and Gen 2 is that kind of mode. And so the different thing. And let's come to that one in a minute. It's kind of a different topic, but.
No, I was just laughing at the Gen part of it.
Yes, the Gen part. Yes. Are you Gen 1 or Gen 2?
To be clear, generation. I am Gen 1.
Nice.
So, but what we're talking about in this sense, we're talking about generation 1, generation 2.
Right. And that just means there's more, in addition to what you said, right? There's this times that. Oh, and then there's time also, which means even more options. So that's the problem that I just wanted to note, is I see that. That's the trend I see right now, is there's so many options on the table for people. It can make it hard to make decisions about what's best for them. And there's quite a learning curve, right? There was a learning curve before about PLM. What's PLM? What capabilities do I need? How does that help my business? How does it fit my strategy, right? So that's all still there. Now layer on, somebody cares about how I deploy it. And here's another one, right? That makes this complicated. If I buy it as a service, it's an expense from a finance perspective. If I buy the licenses and the hardware, it's capital. Okay, there's another thing I didn't want to have to care about when I started down this journey, but now I do, right? So,
so it's not just the deployment; it's basically financial recognition. How does it hit your books? Yep. Which is something that most do not consider when they're looking at a technology tool, but somebody does. To your point, somebody does.
Somebody does.
And I think the vendors have all further complicated, because as they are trying to figure out what all of this means, they are taking different approaches to realizing it, right? Some are building them all in-house from the ground up. Some are acquiring. So, you've got Windchill, which is what you were saying, like heritage PLM system.
Right.
Then you've got, I'm sure that they have a Windchill X or something along those lines.
Yes. Yep.
And then they've got Arena, which they acquired and was native cloud.
That's exactly it, right? So that's a great example. PTC, right? They've got Windchill on-premise. They've had a couple of generations of Windchill on the cloud, right? The one that's active today, I think, is Windchill Plus, I think is the name. And they've got Arena, native cloud, which was an acquisition. Then they've got Onshape, also an acquisition, but effectively it's got some PLM cloud capabilities because there's data management in Onshape, and they're using the Atlas platform to do some other things. So, you know, there are choices. There's a variety of things there that you want to pay attention to. And I want to come back to that finance point for a minute, just to underscore this piece about the too many options. Is I've worked with a couple of clients recently where they've narrowed it down and they're trying to compare A and B. I've got two choices. I could do this PLM system from that vendor and that PLM system from that vendor. And then they get it sideways because they're comparing the on-premise version hosted on a cloud provider against the cloud native option from vendor B. And it's not that those aren't a valid comparison, but when you start to compare things that are apples and oranges, you need to broaden the scope of your cost model, your benefit model, that kind of thing, right? So, for example, I want to nail this down so people don't miss it. Oh yeah, I'm comparing the cost of these two systems, but the cloud one looks much more expensive. Hey, did you factor in the cost of the hardware or the AWS monthly charge or whatever in the on-premise one? Oh, no, I didn't. Well, that's baked into the cost of that one, of the cloud one. So if you didn't compare them, you got an uneven comparison and you made a decision on bad data because your cost models didn't have broad enough scope or equivalent scope. So that's why I bring it up. All these options are tricky, and if you don't pay attention to it and kind of know how to navigate it, it's tough.
And that is the last point is a very important distinction, because if you don't consider it, if you're not aware of that and you make the decision and then somehow your expenses grow exponentially, it's going to cost somebody their reputation, if not their job.
Right. Yeah. Somebody's not going to be happy.
So one of the things that we were talking about, we were talking about like heritage PLM and then a cloud version of that and then native cloud. So it doesn't sound like cloud means the same thing across. And a matter of fact, I know there's a few speakers that we could have on here that, like John Hirschtick jumps to mind. Like his definition of cloud native is completely different, and has a very clear view on it. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why doesn't cloud mean the same thing to everybody?
That's a great question. And I think it's because, well, everybody wants to use, I guess, the terms for their benefit, right? And sometimes it's because of, they're playing the hand that they were dealt. And sometimes they can't change, right? They can't swap out cards. But sometimes, I don't know. I won't go into all the reasons, but I think lots of people are doing it because of what they have to use. And so that's how they want to see cloud, how they want to talk about cloud. There are some folks who have the options who really want to dig into it because that's the hand they were dealt and that's a benefit to them. But without being more obtuse about it, let's just dig into what you're talking about. So we were talking about this a second ago, but I think this is a separate observation and an important one, which is cloud doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. If you take your on-premise PLM solution and you buy your traditional license, or even if it's a subscription license where you're just paying annually the same amount, and you deploy it on servers that you acquire separately that are in the cloud, AWS Gov Cloud, right? So maybe it's even specialized and secure and that kind of specifically secure, that kind of thing. That's a different kind of cloud deployment, right? And I would not call that cloud PLM, although some people will, right? Yes. So that's where it gets fuzzy. That's a different kind of deployment than you go to, Duro, OpenBOM, Arena, one of these folks where it's truly software as a service. You log in, put in your information, plug in your credit card, and there you go. You've got, the username and password. You log into the system. You're using it. Fully functional system. There was, you don't know anything about the server, where it is. Now, again, maybe you do, because maybe they give you a GovCloud instance and they tell you where it is, that kind of thing. But the point being, you didn't have to fool with any of it. The whole thing comes to you as a service, and you stop paying the bill, and it goes away. Right?
Good and bad.
Good and bad. And that's the important differentiator. And there are models in between, right? And there are hybrid models where you use both. And Anyway, there's lots and lots of options back to that complexity point, which is the first point we brought up. But in this one, you really have to dig in and understand what the vendor's offering you and become a little bit of a cloud expert at this terminology to understand what you're getting and what you need to be aware of, what the pitfalls are, right? Like that one about just, all right, you stop paying and it turns off. Well, in the first model where you bought the licenses and put it on Amazon yourself, and you decide to go away from that PLM tool, right? Let's say it was 3D Experience, and you say, okay, I'm done using that. I'm going to switch to Arena. Okay. When you turned off those licenses, you still have the data and maybe even a perpetual license to use it, but just not upgrade it in the future or something like that.
Right.
You could go get that data and pull it out, do whatever you want with it, migrate it, archive it, however you like. If you, let's say you had bought 3D Experience not as an on-premise solution and put it onto Amazon Web Services machines yourself, but you had gone to Dassault and plugged in your credit card because they do have a pure cloud offer, right?
Sure.
And then you stop paying on that one. Well, that data is on servers that they manage.
Right.
That you can't go get it. You lost your login when you stopped paying, right? So it's not like you can go back to the Amazon Web Services server on the back end and do something with it. So
it's not yours.
It's not yours, right? So, and that's, I just used from the same vendor, right? We're talking about the same software, 3D Experience. And it could even be the same version, right? So I'm just talking about how did you buy it that dictated what you get and how it behaves and what modes it can operate in and that sort of thing. And I don't mean to pick on Dassault, right? Because that, I won't say it's exactly the same, right? With Siemens, with PTC, with Aris, but similar things happen in other places. And that's why cloud is not cloud is not cloud. It's ask what you're getting, ask what the limitations are. Another important one there. What about environments, right? This, I don't want to get too far off into a side alley, right? But what I mean by environments is you need a dev, a QA, and a production, or dev, test, prod, something like that, right? Because you are making a PLM system here. It's for the enterprise. Lots of people share it. If you're going to make a change, a configuration change, you should develop it. You should test it out, make sure it's going to work right before you put it in production, and everybody has to, deal with it, whatever mistakes you made. So, when you're dealing with these systems, you should have multiple environments that you can try out your changes on. Well, what happens on cloud? Do you get multiple environments when you buy a license, or do you just get one? I don't know. That's maybe different than the choices you might make if you were buying the license and building out as many environments as you wanted on a cloud.
Right.
Right. And other things. Is the vendor providing it for you is one question, but like another thing that comes up a lot with cloud is upgrade. The benefit of doing cloud native stuff is the vendor's going to upgrade it for you. They're only going to let you configure things in the tool that are upgradable because they do the upgrade on the back end because they own the servers, the code, they own all this stuff. They just upgrade it for you. Okay. Are you comfortable with that? Do you want cloud that gives you more control, that lets you decide when you want to take their new version? Because, by the way, that's another thing that's an option for some vendors. And again, I don't want to get into who does what, but some vendors will let you say, here's when I want you, the vendor, to upgrade my cloud for me. So is it a private tenant for you? Or is it multi-tenant where you're in there, your data's segregated, but you're in a cloud PLM with other people? And so when it's time to upgrade, you all go together because you're all in the system together. It's just your data's walled off from other people. So cloud is not cloud is not cloud.
Well, so to summarize where we are at this point. So cloud and software as a service created an exponential effect on the number of tools available, and the factors that figure into decision making. Deployment options
and choices and all those things. Yeah.
And then the fact that cloud doesn't necessarily mean the same. It's not a singular term with a singular definition. It applies not just to how things are deployed, how they were created, if they were, I'm not even quite sure how to summarize this, but basically it's not just what's available, it's how it's available.
Right.
And the factors for that, like is, access, upgrades. It does definitely change the functionality, because because I know when you have something that's on-prem, you have a high ability to customize, which is good and bad.
Yep.
Slows upgrades for sure, but it makes it available to tailor specifically to your business. Now, when you're going with cloud and you're getting regular and consistent updates, you have very little ability to customize because you have less of ability to customize because
it's very different.
Yeah.
Right. And you're right. I mean, in general, that's a fair observation. I just want to be careful with that because I do see the vendors doing a good job. Always. I know, you know me. There's always another side to this, Mr. Contrarian. But some of these systems you can customize, and it's by customizing outside of them, and they're doing a good job of saying, well, you can't do it inside, but you could do it next to, and that kind of stuff. But anyway, yes.
Right.
And my take on this, because I want to differentiate it from that first point we made. First one was, there's just a lot more options. So the decisions are difficult because it's more complex and you have to sort through it all. And you have to make sure you're comparing apples and apples. But this second one, I think of it as more like fog of war, right? Like, so what do we see in the industry? I see that people are using this term that not everybody understands or wants to understand. And they're kind of using it to make broad brushstrokes and paint this cloud color on everything. And it's not right. It's not helping people and it's confusing them. So that's how this point is different, right? The first one is the complexity is there. You have to sort through it. This one is be careful. People may be trying to confuse you, right? To better compete or to make their orange look like an apple. So I know they're related.
And yeah, they're both fruit. But to your point, though, when you were talking about heritage PLM on the cloud versus cloud native. So cloud native, by and large, are they are newer comers to the market than the heritage PLM systems. So I'm guessing that there is a little less functionality, probably a little less mature, just based on experience. Yeah. Perhaps a little bit more singular of a focus. We're looking in this particular vertical rather than the breadth that a lot of the heritage PLM systems can come up with. But they're also, because of the delivery, they're also evolving much more quickly. Would those all be fair statements?
I think that's all fair. There are a couple of exceptions, right? I want to be fair to the folks at Arena, right? The PTC product that was bomb.com back in the day. They've been around a long time and cloud native from the beginning, right? So, and I don't want to call their product immature either. But to your point, they were a little bit of a niche player for a while. So, yeah, I think if you compared their lifespan, how did their product mature over its life compared with, a Team Center or a Windchill or an Innovia or something like that. Yeah, I think some of those heritage players, they had bigger customers, bigger accounts, more industries in a way that means that, yes, those heritage products are very mature in terms of functionality and capability today. And even a legacy cloud provider like Arena maybe doesn't have quite the same functionality, right?
Right.
And certainly your observation I fully agree with on newer tools that have come out in the last 3 to 5 years, the Propels, the Duros, the OpenBOM, that kind of thing. They're focused and they're growing and they're changing fast and they're adding capabilities fast, but partly because of the cloud technology and the way they can change quickly and the fact that they're gathering large numbers of customers who all are on the same code base. There's no forking, right, in the way that on-premise customers, I customized this. And, then PTC goes around and looks at those 15 Windchill deployments and they say, there's enough in common there. I could make a module. Like that was a slower process than, hey, feature request. And they just find their way into the release cycle of a cloud-based system. So I think that observation is right. There are a few exceptions. I don't want folks at those places to listen to this and be like, they don't know what they're talking about. Maybe
I'm sure.
We don't,
well, you know what? It's a conversation. They're happy to come out, make some comments. We'll bring you on and have a good conversation about it. All right. So paying attention to our time, and I'm not wrapping this up yet, but I do know that we do have a limited time, and there are some other things to get to. We've talked a lot about cloud and its effect. What else? It's one of the things that it seems like, aside from, and I don't think it's driven by cloud, although it could be a factor, like what PLM used to mean and what it means now. It seems like it's like growing tentacles, if you will.
I think that's right. That's The thing I would share, back to this question of what do we see in the market, I see that a lot. I see that PLM is being asked to do things today that it wasn't asked to do 10 years ago, that people maybe didn't even think of as a discipline that was related to PLM 10 years ago. And some of them are, and they're just evolutions of what PLM's always done. But if I was to generalize it all, I'd say the scope of PLM is growing and continues to grow, which is a little bit counterintuitive to something we were just talking about a minute ago when we said, well, some of these heritage PLMs, they matured a lot. They added all these capabilities, and they've matured. They all sort of have the same thing.
Yeah, but
they
mature
have matured,
doesn't.
but they're not done.
Yeah, I was gonna say mature doesn't imply static, if you will.
Right.
I mean,
that's what those of us with gray in our beard would like to think. Right? Is that mature doesn't imply static or dead
doesn't
or
mature,
anything like that.
Mature implies stability and reliability, but does not exclude a certain ability to be dynamic, because PLM itself is dynamic. Right. I mean, it's and we've talked about this over multiple episodes, how PLM has evolved from product data management into product lifecycle management. And I think not with the name change, obviously, but certainly the name change and the concept change there really opened it up to, okay, the product lifecycle is not just the product data, right? It's not just going from design to manufacturing. It's all of the other things. It's it's a software lifecycle management.
Right.
How many hardware products these days have some level of software in them?
Yeah.
Most of them, or not most of them, but a lot of them.
A lot of them do. Yeah. So let me give you 3 angles on it, right? Let me kind of rapid fire through this. Okay. So here's one area that the scope of PLM is growing. New domain, new discipline, MBSE, model-based systems engineering. So 10 years ago, I think most people would have said systems engineering. Yeah, that's part of the engineering process for certain industries, right? Aerospace, defense, maybe shipbuilding, some people doing electronics, that kind of thing. And then even electric cars, they were certainly recognizing it. But complex systems, okay, that's its own discipline, but nobody would have said it was necessarily part of PLM. Today, guess what? Yeah, MBSE, everybody's got an answer for that in the heritage PLM players. They're working on it, they're evolving their philosophy, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's one. Didn't used to be a thing, now it's a thing. Here's another angle. What about simulation lifecycle management, SLM, or simulation process data management, SPDM, or there's a bunch of different acronyms here. Different people have different views. But the point being to put my finite element simulation type data into a system that's like a PLM, because it is product data, right? Right. But B, it behaves a lot like things that PDM and PLM systems do. I need to manage it. I need to manage versions. I need to do iterations. I have processes around them. The output of A turns into the input of B, and then that makes C happen. And all right, so there's a bunch of stuff that's like, just like the capabilities of PLM. Hey, wait a minute. It's product data. Why don't we put it in PLM? Okay, so there's a growth in the scope of PLM, but not that it's a new area. So that's why I say that's, point 2. Point 3, you mentioned another one, ALM, software, right? So a lot of the systems, well, I won't say a lot. Some of the heritage players aren't trying to do ALM, application lifecycle management, and software development inside of their PLM, but they're very software aware for integrations and figuring out how to interface with those systems and how to do things that maybe are shared, like requirements or, MBSE, systems engineering, how to do that somewhere so that it can be used across both systems. So that's kind of a third mode that they're thinking of in terms of growing their scope, which is how do I interface and have data models that deal with it? And I'll throw you a fourth one. The fourth one is just maturing all of the data that's traditional into sort of the next gen of how we work with it in engineering and product development. So model-based, right? So model-based enterprise, that's this evolution that we're seeing. Okay, PLM system X is good at managing 3D models and drawings from the mechanical CAD system. Well, but now it needs to deal with the 3D models with the FT&A on them when there is no drawing, and it needs to be shared with the manufacturing model and connected to it. Okay, suddenly its schema, its data model, its behaviors, all those things need to be different. So maybe that's not growing in scope, but changing in terms of how it behaves. So those are the areas. Those are at least 4 quick ones, right? And you could probably find more examples of each of those 4 ideas.
And I'm going to add one more because this is something, and this is probably one of the newest trends that I have seen. And we've done a little bit of work with Clover and with, for instance, Canvas GFX on their new Envision product, which is customers, they've bought into the PLM view of life. And now that they're running their product through PLM and they've got a digital thread, is they actually want their standalone applications to work within those workflows. So I no longer want my work instruction to be something I have to download the file or check out the file from the PLM system, work with it, and then create something and then upload it over here. I actually want to work with that work instruction functionality within my PLM system. I don't want to leave that environment. Same thing I just heard the other day from a prospect who's looking at, they're an aerospace manufacturer. They're looking for their next generation of CAM tool, and they want it to work within their PLM workflow. So it's expanding into, again, different areas where similar to simulation PDM or simulation lifecycle management.
Right. Deeper integrations, more apps, more things in that lifecycle tool. I'm with you. Yep.
Very much so. So that was a lot in a very short period of time. And I'm really, it always is. And I'm always left feeling like, God, we've got so much more to talk to. But it was a snapshot of what we're seeing in the industry, particularly what you're seeing in the industry and on the ground. So let me just recap, just very high level, is cloud and software as a service has multiplied the choices and the factors in those choices. So it's not just a PLM system, it's how you deploy it. It's the different functionality. It's the how you access it, how you finance it, et cetera. It's all of those pieces.
Agreed. Too many options, more complexity. Yep, I'm with you.
Exponential. We've got the fact that cloud is not a singular definition either. You've got different versions of cloud, and what that means. And then
this is my fog of war one, right? That's how I look at that one. Is it's just blurry and it's hard, so be careful. Yep.
Exactly. And then we've got the scope, right? The scope of PLM keeps growing. So sounds to me like Razorleaf's going to be in business for a long time.
So we got a lot to talk about. If people want to hear what we think and want to talk to us about it, I hope so. But I mean, that is the net message, right? Is what I see for customers is there's a lot going on, a lot's changing, and you need to stay educated, keep yourself up to date with this stuff, and ask questions, get insight from partners and people who know to make good decisions. That, I think, is the bottom line. And I think that the dynamicism, the fact that the environment is changing, that the products are changing, the technology is changing, your business needs are changing. So it's not like you will ever have a singular answer to the question of like, what do I need? It's one of those things that you need to be constantly revisiting. This we talked about in one of our earlier podcasts about multiple PLM systems, that this is something you need to constantly be revisiting. And to your point, educating yourself on. What do you mean by cloud? And what functionality, like how do you need to deploy? Because there's a lot of options out there. And keeping your technology strategy and your PLM strategy aligned with your business strategy, right?
Yes.
That's the key.
That's probably the best one sentence summary ever.
I'll take it.
I want to thank you very much for joining me in this discussion. It's been a great one. It has been a good one. And again, always feel like we barely scratched the surface. We could keep talking like this for another couple hours probably. But I want to invite our listeners in to be part of this conversation. What are the things that you're seeing out in the industry? What did we miss? What's different? Be part of the conversation.
What do you see, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, so reach out to us via social media on any of the platforms that you receive your podcasts. We would love to hear from you. The conversation's a whole lot more interesting if you're a part of it. And until next time, stay sharp.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for being here and listening to this episode of Stay Sharp with Razorleaf. If you have any questions about data quality and AI, we'd love to have that conversation. So just leave a comment on our post or send an email to podcast@razorleaf.com. We appreciate all the feedback we get from our listeners, so please be sure to send us a note. And also, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform or our YouTube channel. Until next time, stay sharp.